So moving on to the midfield. So we haven't really seen Matic a lot. There's a lot of potential with Matic the previous season. It was almost unplayable without Matic, but this season he's taken a step back, and McFred has, taken up the midfield. So what are your thoughts on McFred?
Look, there's a two-sided effect. It's two sides of the same coin. Why I say that is because when you look at McFred's performances, they always seem to work out in the big games as well. So whenever we're playing a big game, you will always see McTominay and Fred. Why? Because you want to cut out the ball playing midfielders or the players of the opposition team in midfield, right? So that's why you have McTominay and Fred to kind of guard that back four that we've had, which is already leaking, a decent bunch of goals. That being said, would I prefer them over a ball playing CDM? Definitely not. If we replace them with, like rumors have said it, like a Rice or, probably an NDD as well, or someone who's a little more proven than like a Kamavinga or a Sumare who's probably going to Leicester City, I think it's a great chance for us to, replace both of them with one player and then have an attacking midfielder play as well. So you could have Pogba and Bruno play in that midfield, creating positions. You can then have Rashford play in his preferred, left wing position or like inside left position, and we could potentially have like a right winger or in Sancho or whoever or Greenwood if we still stick with that next season. So my thoughts on McFred, we need to probably replace them with one player. If we do replace them with one player, like a Matic sort of player, like we played Matic, Pogba, and Bruno a lot last season. Would I let go of McTominay or Fred? I think I'd probably let go of Fred, seeing his performances this season.
So before you answer, Anshuman, there's one question. Out of McTominay and Fred, what is the position expected out of them? Who's the CDM? Who's the CM? Who's supposed to defend? Who's supposed to attack? It's very confusing because they're both kind of not good at both, aspects of the game. You expect them to defend, they're not too good, even though, McTominay sometimes has that crazy good game like he had in the final. Sometimes you feel like he's unplayable. He has the physicality for it, of course, so that helps. But who does what in that midfield? What are their roles?
I think when it comes to McFred, I think you have already there is a bit of an answer in your question, because we call them McFred because we call them one single entity. They are essentially one player because that's the role that they're playing. And when you look at the defense issues that we have, like this is not a compatible defense, that is not a functional defense in the long run. That brings up a requirement to have defensively solid midfield, which brings us to a question whether you bring a TDM or you bring a defensive pivot. And you need to bring a defensive pivot because in Nemanja Matic, we have a decent enough CDM, but he's not good enough in this level. And the reason I say that is because if you would think about the Leicester match that we had recently, in which we played a second string side and lost. In the first half of that match, Nemanja Matic absolutely showed us why we need a number 6, and in the second half, he showed us why he couldn't be that player. Because in the first half, he showed us that he was able to sit in the bed of that midfield, acquire that position, cut out passing lanes, play as an auxiliary centre back in the middle of your centre back pairing, drive the ball upward from that position, allowing both of the midfielders that play alongside him, Nemanja Juan Mata and Donny van de Beek, to two good on the ball midfielders to do their thing, to just be creative. And he can hold the ball as well. He can drive the ball as well. He's good at that. But then he was caught out a lot of times in the second half. I think Chagla Soyuncu, the goal that he scored from the set piece, he was the one marking him. Nemanja Matic was the one marking him, and there were a couple of occasions throughout the season where he has been caught out. So those were the two halves of the same side that showed us why we need a number 6 and why he can be that number 6. What happens with McFred is that both of them are good at the same thing. They are good at cutting passing lanes. They can completely intercept. They are great at bouncing off. If you are creating a system of triangulated passing, if you want someone to just bounce the balls off, they can do that. Both of them can do that. But what they aren't good, particularly on the long run, is holding the ball, keeping the ball to themselves, moving the ball around themselves, taking the initiative in their own hands. That's not something they're good at, and that's not their fault, because you are asking them to be something that they aren't, and both of them are of the same kind. So what ends up happening in most of the matches is that you have 66% of your midfield that is not good on the ball. And that might work against teams like Manchester City, that might work against teams like Liverpool, who are going to bring the game to you, so that they don't have to have the initiative of playing the ball themselves, keeping the ball to them, creating chances. That is not their responsibility in those matches, which is why we see against these matches that United always come through. United end up playing well, and the end up drawing or winning the match. But when you are playing in the league, when you're going for the titles, most of the teams that you're going to come against, they're gonna just drop back like Villarreal did in the final, and they're gonna ask you to create chances, and that is not going to happen with a duo like McFredge, because they're not good at doing that, and that's not their fault. And Solskjaer has had to stick up to them, because once again, when the season started, we did not go into this season with a number 6, and as Matt's game has showed, that he cannot be trusted in big games, especially if the opposition sits in the sits with a low block and have a couple of players in them that can tear United apart in the counter attack. Then you will have situations like Başak Şehir, where you will just not be able to do anything of it, and your defense just go up in the air. So that is the reason why we had to play with a defensive pivot, and it's not good enough in the long run, because most of the teams are going to play a low block, in which cases you need midfielders, you need players to have the side which are good on the ball, which is why I keep saying every time I talk about a midfield that if we bring a number 6, that can sit in the middle of right in the middle of a pitch, right above the centre back pairing, it will push our midfielders ahead. It will, having a fully defensive centre number 6, will allow ball playing midfielders like Van de Beek, Paul Pogba to be more and more assertive in the game, to be more and more worry free in the game, because Pogba ends up having a lot of defensive responsibilities if you play him in a defensive pivot alongside someone like Scott McTominay, which is really not his thing. He has said that on multiple occasions. He does not like to defend. So that is why having a number 6 is crucial for us. Another thing that we need the number 6 for is it will free up Fred and McTominay to be available on the bench. And we saw this last time when we lost to Sevilla. We saw this time when we lost to Villarreal, that when what United start with does not work out, you look at the bench and you yourself don't find any solutions, like which of these players do you think are really going to make a difference, and you don't find anyone. And bringing players into the starting 11 frees up these players who are not good enough in the starting 11 to be relegated to the bench, to become a different option to come from the bench, which is why we again need a number 6 to be in the midfield, so that we can actually resuscitate our midfield to be a midfield that can actually deal with low blocks. And when it comes to matches like Manchester City, I think Fred and McTominay are absolutely fantastic, because in those situations they do what they're supposed to. They're supposed to take care of his pressing. They're supposed to take care of cut the passing lanes. The focus on creating chances is not on them, because United can tear anyone in the counter attack. In those matches, it works. But for most of the matches, you're going to need the focus is going to be on you to create chances and break the other teams down. And for that, we don't have a player, and we need one, which is why we have a responsibility to get a number 6 in the summer.
So that kind of ties into what I wanted to ask you next. So speaking of Paul Pogba, he's kind of our brand new signing in the left wing department. So what are your thoughts, Gaurav, on how we've been using Pogba? Is he, it's definitely not supposed to be a left winger, but then do we put him in the number 10, which is definitely sealed by Bruno, or do we push him further back into the central midfield? What are your thoughts on how we should utilize Pogba in the future, but more importantly, how we have utilized him this past season? What are your thoughts on that?
Look, I think it's pretty shrewd to have Pogba on the left wing, to be very honest with you, because when people talk about have been talking about his best position for, I don't know, God knows, 4 or 5 years, they say, he best plays, in midfield 3, probably left side of a midfield 3. Him being a left, inside forward or left winger, so to say, is almost like playing, in a midfield 3 on the left side of a midfield 3, but more attacking. This gives his mind the ability to forget about defending, and we know for sure that he does not like to defend. When we use him in a double pivot, like we have in a couple of games where we played like a McTominay Pogba or a Fred Pogba, it just doesn't work out, because that's not his best place. We've seen him lose the ball a couple of times in important positions. So when you lose as a number 6, so to say, or as a double pivot, if you're losing the ball at that position, you're making our already vulnerable centre backs more vulnerable. to counter attacks or second counters. Winning the second balls are very important, and Pogba is not the best at that. We know that. And when we saw him play up on that left wing, up top on that left wing, let's look at for example the AC Milan game. He didn't play the first half. He came on in the second half, and there was a massive difference as to when Paul Pogba plays on that side versus when he's not in the team at all. And he was the one who created the goal, or scored the goal. So I think it was a shrewd signing. Is that his best place? Definitely not. Would I like to see him play as a 10? Probably, but we have that sealed with Bruno. So I'd probably see him play as a number 8 in a midfield 3 if we have a number 6. But we don't have a number 6. That's the problem. Him playing in a midfield 2 with either McTominay or Fred just does not work.
Anshuman, your thoughts on that?
Well, I have a lot of thoughts on Paul Pogba. I've written about it, I've ranted about it. But I think the crucial part that I always maintain when I talk about Paul is when we signed him for 100 million, breaking the transfer record, we did not know the kind of player we were getting. Because for 4 years, for 5 years, the discussion has always been about how to unlock Paul Pogba, how to set up a team that we can get the best out of this player. And the reality of the matter is you don't build a team to unlock Paul Pogba. You build a team beside Paul Pogba. And the thing that I'm trying to say here is that Paul Pogba works best when you don't put any kind of instructional burden on him. Now, why I say instructional burden is relative to how Pogba likes to play. Like, you have someone like Daniel James who needs a manager that can give 100 instructions to him so that he can perform on the pitch. There are players who need instructions to perform. Then there are players who are just good and you just need to let them see. And that is what Paul Pogba is. This is the kind of guy who just need to look and say, you know what, just do your thing. Just do your thing. The team will take care of the defense. The team will take care of the instructions. You just do your thing. And this is something that we have seen when he was playing in Juve. You had one of the best defenses of Barzagli, Chiellini, Bonucci. You have a midfield maestro in Andrea Pirlo, battle-hardened generals in Claudio Marchisio and Arturo Vidal, who could take the case of defensive responsibility, will take care of the instructional part of everything. So Pogba did not have to. And that definitely happened in Manchester United because you put him in number 10, you put instructions on him, or you play him in a defensive pivot, and you ask him to play, come back on defense like Mourinho did, and you ask him to drag back. That's not his game. He will never perform well. And that is why you look at the side that won the World Cup, in which he played again in a defensive pivot. Yes, but he played in that defensive pivot alongside N'Golo Conte. And if you are going to play in a defensive pivot, who better to play with than N'Golo Conte? And even then Didier Deschamps plays has a tendency in which he plays his defensive midfielders out wide. There's Matuidi plays on the left of France. Moussa Sissoko plays as a right mid. So there was a lot of chances for Paul Pogba where he could just shine and do his thing. And when he's allowed to do his thing, this left-sided channel is the natural place where he likes to come from, irrespective of whether he starts in the midfield or he starts on the left. He's not a left winger. He's not number 8. He's not anything. He's just that player who occupies that left-hand role, no matter where you put him. That is his most natural position. And letting Pogba play his most natural play is the only way to get the best out of him. And a lot of credit to Solskjaer on that front. First of all, dealing with the whole Raiola and Pogba situation earlier in the season, after which Pogba could easily have been ostracized out of the club completely. He didn't do that. He had a proper communication with him, and he was integrated back into the team. He was given this left-sided role because Rashford needed rest, because right-sided issues were again surfacing up again. So Rashford was moved to the right-hand side. So this was a makeshift thing that worked. But the reason Paul Pogba works on the left-hand side is because that is his favorite channel. That left side that he occupies, even though he plays in midfield or wing, that he's always loved that. And as Gaurav pointed that thing out earlier, that if you play him with a number 6 that can take care of the defensive responsibilities, then you can completely play him as in a number 8 position. Because once again, he'll occupy that left-hand channel in an advanced role. He's not going to be a number 10 because being a number 10 requires a lot of focus. And that focus has been taken away from him by Bruno, who just does his thing. And so Pogba can do his thing. And when he's allowed to do that, he's absolutely fantastic. He's always shown up in matches in which he's just allowed to breathe. He's just allowed to be. That has always been Paul Pogba. And it's not his problem that he was bought in for 100 million. It is not his problem that people looked at him and thought, okay, we'll give him a lot of instructions. We'll make him the centerpiece of our attack. And he'll just perform. That's not him. And that's not his fault that he has had to deal with that. Now he has working with a manager that gets it, that lets him breathe. And that is why he's performing well. Can he play on the left-hand side? He can, especially in the matches like Villarreal, in which I really thought that if he had a number 6, We could have brought down Van de Beek. He would have stayed alongside Bruno. We would have had Pogba on the left because pace is not a requirement that we needed. We needed our best ball playing midfielders on the pitch who could have broken that low block down, and that would have been absolutely integral. So Pogba can have both of those roles, as far as I think. There is a lot of things going up in the air where he's going to stay or he's not going to stay. Should he be staying? That is a completely different discussion. But let's assume that he stays. He can completely play that role as a left winger. He can play as an advanced number 8 from the left hand side. Granted that once again, if he wants to play in the midfield, he needs to play with a proper number 6 that can take care of the defensive responsibilities. Because Fred and McTominay are not going to do that. When he plays alongside them, he again has to come back. He again has to track back. And by the way, it's not that he's not good at it. It's just that when he has to focus on it, then it takes a lot away from his attacking now. That is his party piece, really. So if he's not able to do what he's best at, his defensive side, that when he makes mistakes, when he gets caught out in the midfield, when he fails to make a tackle or gives away a penalty, then that gets a lot more traction on social media because of course it does. That's not his thing, and he shouldn't be allowed to do that. So yeah, that's what the whole playing Paul Pogba, he's always going to occupy that left hand side, and you just need to let him do that. And as far as players are concerned, once again, this just goes back down to getting ourselves a proper number 6 that can take care of him so that he can play in the midfield.
Yeah. So just to add to that, I mean, the very, very clear example was the United City game where we didn't let City win the title, where we won 3-2. Pogba scored 2 of those goals. And if you see the midfield that we had that day was Matic, Herrera, and Pogba. And Pogba played, you could say, left of a midfield 3. And he was so high up on the field, he was almost playing like a number 10. And you can see what he does when he gets into the box. He can score a header. You can see what he does when he plays off the other players in midfield, or when he plays off Sanchez on the wing and Lingard on the wings, who were playing, against City on that day. So very, very important player. I think we should keep him. Definitely think we should keep him if we can.
Definitely. So let's talk about the man who changed, our team. Taught us to dream again, brought us back from the dead. So Bruno. So Gaurav, let's hear about Bruno.
What do you want me to say? Do you want me to say he's Cantona-esque? He definitely is. He has reformed this club. I was watching, I think, Monday Night Football with Gary Neville and Jamie Carragher, and they said, I clearly remember Carragher saying something like, a lot of people think that United is very far off Liverpool and City, when Liverpool and City were challenging for that 100 points, 97 points, 98 points last season. And we were, I think, third with very far off. And Carragher clearly said that, it's sometimes just that one person or that 2 players that you bring into the club, that completely change the mentality of all the players around you, completely bring the best out of the players around you. And that's what Bruno has done. And he mentioned Carragher mentioned Suarez at Liverpool, who did the same thing for them and almost won them the title. Fine, we haven't won them we haven't won the title, but we've definitely closed the gap, with Bruno being in our team in his first season with Manchester United. So you could look at the stats and say, he loses the ball so many times, or his pass completion rate is probably not as much. But the chances he creates is unparalleled to any other midfielder in Europe. Currently, this season, I think he's had 28, goals and assists, which has beaten Frank Lampard's, season of 27 goals and assists this season. So that's fantastic already, to have that player and come and do it at a club like Man United, where like the pressure is immense. So to come in, put your collar up and be like, I'm going to be the one that takes a step forward for this team. It's just brilliant. But I think what's more, I mean, of course he has his own individual ability and we've seen his performances. What's more is he's changed the mentality of the players around him. You look at the post-match interviews and the pre-match interviews of players before Bruno came and post Bruno came. Every player definitely said, before they gave the whole media, I guess, rationale before Bruno came in saying, we need to do better. Maybe we need to play with a freer mind. Every player who after Bruno has come and says, we need to win the ball back. We need to play faster. We need to score more goals. nothing less than a trophy is good enough for us. Second is progress, but it means nothing. We saw Rashford's emotional interview after the Europa League. He says, "We came to the final, no one's going to remember us. We came second, no one's going to remember us. We are going to come back we're going to come back hungrier. We're going to come back with a stronger mentality. This is going to make us stronger, and we're going to go for the titles next season." So I think that mentality is probably the most important thing that Bruno has brought to this team.
Yeah, and something I always regret is not getting Bruno when we wanted him. I feel that if we had gotten him in that summer instead of the winter window, I think we could have done a lot more by this point. What do you think, or do you agree, disagree to that sentiment of mine?
Possibly. I think that's an if situation. Of course, we could have probably closed the gap to City, Liverpool last season. I don't think we have the squad enough to win the title. To be very honest with you, we had probably the biggest chance this season because all the, I would say, like, the bigger teams didn't have a set out preseason, and you could say that owing to the bad form that United and City had in the beginning of the season was their preseason. I don't think we have the squad yet, or he has the players around him yet to win us the title. But if we do bring in those one or two key starting players next season, we'll be able to challenge for the title definitely.
Anshuman, your thoughts on Bruno?
I mean, there is very little about Bruno Fernandes that's not been said already. But I think there's something that's very important that Gaurav pointed out, that he made the players believe again. And that is something, that is one of those factors that really cannot be quantified. You don't see that appear on visualizations or your metrics. That when players have intent, when players have something that they can actually believe in, that belief that we can come back in a match that we have seen so many times this season, that Bruno has been at the center of that. And yes, I do agree to the point that you made, Nishant, that had we bought him in the summer of the season that we got him in, would that have made a lot of difference? I think we would have really bridged that gap a lot more closer. And that is really a party piece, isn't it? At this point, that we end up buying players a lot later than we initially want them to. So that is that. I mean, in game, I don't really think his pass completion is something that worries me, because verticality and chance creations are something that he has brought in the game that we really needed. I don't really give a lot of credence to pass completion, especially when it comes to attacking number 10, because we used to have 99% pass completion and 80% possession under Louis van Gaal. And for God's sake, I cannot go back to the time of Louis van Gaal. We can never have that we used to have, just sideways passing that wasn't really going anywhere. And we had that, and we needed that intent, and we got that intent with Bruno. So at the numbers that he's turning out, the belief that he has brought back in the team, the leadership that he's giving us, his entire persona has fit with Manchester United's ethos so brilliantly that it really hardly ever happens, which is why people really call him Cantones. Because it's not just that he plays well, it's that he resonates, his own persona resonates with Manchester United so brilliantly. So that is, I'm absolutely glad about the way we have brought Bruno, and the way he has performed for us, the way he talks, the way he plays on the pitch, the way he performs himself on the pitch. I think it's absolutely fantastic. It is going to be a cog in the wheel for a long time to come, or at least as long as we purport ourselves to be a club that can actually win something. Because every time he talks about it, that we have to win this, and we have to win trophies, it always makes me feel like, he can eventually move away because he's 26. And if United don't really, which I think we should, in 1 year and a half, if we don't support ourselves to be a team that can actually go and win things, then I don't think this is a guy who's going to hang around long enough to be proved, to be made promises to once again. I think he will leave. But for now, I think he's absolutely crucial part of our team, and I'm really, really happy to have had him.
Something he gets a lot of flack for is the fact that he scores a lot of penalties, and the goal count is high because he scores all the penalties. Now, while that in itself is a skill, not everyone scores all the penalties they take. But I was looking up some numbers earlier, and I don't know if they're credible. I need to check it on a more official website. But I saw that he scored 18 goals this season, out of which 9 were penalties. And he scored 8 goals last season, out of which 4 were penalties. So that's kind of 50% of his goals are coming from penalties. That's, if you want to keep that as the negative of it. The positive is that half of his goals are coming through, in-game play. So what are your thoughts?
I think that for the at least for the people who think that penalties are a very annoying thing, penalties are anyone can take penalties. Just ask Leo Messi and the entire Manchester City squad if they think that that is the case. Because like you said, Nishant, penalty taking is a skill in its own right. And yes, we can completely have a separate discussion regarding whether penalties should be given for separate occasions or should penalties be reduced because you get the same penalty for breaking someone's leg then you get if the ball grazes to you and grazes your hand for absolutely no fault of your own. So that is a different discussion whether penalties should be given for the same infringements and should we have different fouls. But as long as they count, as long as they are the final thing that are given when you foul in the 12-yard box, then that is what is going to happen. Then that is going to take the penalty. I think his penalty taking skill is absolutely fantastic. The hop, skip, and jump that he takes really adds another layer to his penalty taking. I don't think he does that all the time. He used to do that. He missed his penalty once, and then he has started to mix things up. Sometimes he takes it, sometimes he doesn't take it. Sometimes he takes a even shorter run up. So he has been able to find out situations in which he can take different penalties and every penalty taker, from Cristiano Ronaldo to Bruno Fernandes, every single penalty taker will be analyzed over and over and over again. But it is a skill to have. You need a lot more grit for it. You need a lot of skill, a lot of just a lot of creativity to be able to oscillate between different ways you're going to take a penalty, different regions in which you're going to slot the penalty. And I have absolutely no qualms with Bruno Fernandes scoring, even if he scored 30 of his 30 penalties and won the Golden Boot for it. I wouldn't really care. I'm not those one kind of person. I think that penalty is a skill in its own right, and it's great that we have someone who can at least dispatch them away.
Absolutely. Yeah. Gaurav, anything to add to that?
No, absolutely. I mean, yeah, he scored 9 goals, which are penalties, but he also came into a squad which is supposed to be one of the best clubs in the world, Manchester United, where I think Rashford or Pogba were the penalty takers before him. And he said, no, I'm going to step up and take the penalties. So you've got to have that confidence and ability and skill to put every penalty, behind the goalkeeper. And I think he scored 9 out of 10 penalties that he's attempted. So yeah, kudos to him.
What's on that?